welcome back to my channel. I am the Grim Reader, Kathy Grimm, and I come to you with a summer reading plans video. Summer reading plans, chatty, catch up, that kind of thing. So we're into the summer. I have handed my grades in, it's all gone, push it away, and I'm trying to sort of hone in on a good, productive summer. So as I wrote in my journal today, there's a bit of a tension between wanting to completely kind of let go and just relax, but also kind of wanting to be productive and read a lot and, do my projects. And some of let me just show you something from my stationery, from my journal, basically. What people in the journal community sometimes do, and I have a kind of not so great relationship to it, because I think it can get kind of crazy, but they do these things called habit tracking. So where you list your habits that you want to do every day, and then you check them off as you do them. And in general, I think I need to be careful with this kind of thing, because it can be sort of OCD-ish and not that helpful, and sort of fake stress, like, oh my gosh, I didn't check off something on my list. But the reason I'm doing it is that most of my things that I'm checking off have to do with my stretching routines for my health issues. So, for example, I have a bunch of foot stretches I'm supposed to do every day, and back stretches. And the one thing that I haven't really done a good job of is I'm supposed to walk 20 minutes a day, which I didn't do yesterday. I did it the day before. I didn't do it yesterday, and I'm probably not going to do it today because... So one of the stupid issues, or a bit annoying, is that our road is sort of, as many roads in America, it doesn't have a footpath, so no sidewalk. And the road itself, it's low traffic because it's a cul-de-sac, so that's good. But it slopes upward, and it has cracks in it, and the sides of it are a little. And there was one time when I actually did kind of hurt my ankle or knee. It was actually my knee, by stumbling a little bit on the side. And even though it's low traffic, you still have to kind of scooch over if a car comes. Anyway, point being that for someone who's sort of trying to get back their walking mojo, and I have this Achilles issue, it's a little bit treacherous. I went the other day, and what I'm going to try and do is get, yet again, my poor husband is going to drive me to the local park so I can walk around the track a little bit with my audio or whatever. And only 20 minutes, taking it slow so that I can be ready to... In the beginning of August, we have booked a cabin in this area of Ohio that's beautiful called Hocking Hills. And we're going to go there to sort of in celebration of our wedding anniversary. And there are some easy hikes there where it's even paved. It's wheelchair accessible, so it will be accessible for someone who doesn't walk that well. So I'm going to get fit for that, for a little bit of mild hiking. And of course, the big trip in December is looming, even though it's only May. End of May or middle of May. So yeah, most of these things, I do have meditation on here and Duolingo, and also read and rest. So there are a few other things on here, but it's basically a few medication things and my exercises that I want to track, that I do them. Just kind of have a handle on that. But of course, let's get into the reading. And I'm a little bit... So the first thing I want to talk about is the one book that's not on my big pile here. I have a lot here. Hopefully this video won't be too long. I'll put timestamps in. So I did finish The Morning Star last night, and it was... So people who read it, you probably know what I'm talking about, how the ending is a bit of a surprise. So there's two sections at the end that are a little bit different from the rest of the book. And, not knowing about that, I blithely thought it would be a breeze to finish it fairly quickly, even though I have a hard time finishing. I procrastinate the finishing of big books or bigger books. And lo and behold, first there's this first slightly weirder part that's still very good, connected to one of the main characters. And then there's basically a piece of writing that one of the characters in the book wrote. So it's an article, basically, but it's written in the voice of this other character from the book. And it's just denser. It's a denser sort of meditation on some of the issues that are in the book. And then it sort of zooms back out into an interaction that character has with someone else, a very moving... the whole book is... I was thinking the other day how it's a very vibey book. It's just all about vibes. It's a vibey book. Vibes. And the vibes are fascinating. So first of all, he's an excellent writer, so you're kind of sucked in. And then to the everyday life of these characters and sort of their stream of consciousness as they go about their sometimes really busy lives. One of the characters very busy and I think it's a she. She seems to just take it all in stride, being a nurse, taking care of her mother, worrying about her kids, and and just kind of, and also, so that's one of the things that you just kind of get into the lives of these people, but they all have sort of, so the connecting elements of the story are, first of all, this strange big star that has suddenly appeared on the horizon, this kind of supernova. And one conceit of it is the fact that he diminishes the doom scrolling or whatever scrolling that most of us would do in such a situation. Yeah, that's a bit of a conceit, because we know that the minute something weird happens on the sky, we're all going to go look at the social media about it, or at least turn on the television. And there's a little bit of people looking stuff up, but they seem to all be so. It's a bit sort of surprising how uninterested in figuring out what the stars some of them seem to be. But it's okay. You just go with it because it's Knausgaard. So that's the morning star is one thing, and then what I especially like are their interactions with, well, nature in general, and then also the animals. So the insects and the birds. There's a lot of bird stuff. So the way, and then even on the cover here, you see the star here and the birds. The animals in general are changing the way they behave in this kind of spooky way, and I love that kind of stuff. It reminded me a little bit of Drive My Plow, even though it's a very different book. But animals starting to behave weirdly, you know something's up with the universe or with the planet. And actually, what I really do kind of love about the book is it's 666 pages of preliminary stuff, like the actual juice of the matter or whatever is going on is going to be hopefully in this next book. And only someone like Knausgaard, I kept thinking as I was reading it, this dense part where he's kind of talking about, Nietzsche or whatever, philosophy, Kierkegaard a little bit. I'm thinking only you, Knausgaard, could make me want to still read this at the end after reading 600 pages of this book, and now we have this little article at the end by one of the characters. Okay, Knausgaard. Okay, okay, Karl Ove. He gets away with stuff that other people wouldn't in my book. And the other thing, what was I going to say? Yeah, the whole conceit of that it's 666 pages of preliminary stuff. But in a way, I kept thinking about how the favorite parts of any dystopia or disaster show, movie, whatever, are the beginnings of it, the sort of the quiet before the storm. And it's as if the whole book is just build up to whatever is happening. But I just love it so much. It's a 5-star read. I love the nature stuff. I love animals being weird. People start seeing things and yeah, it's a very vibey book, but if you're into the vibes, you're going to like this one. Anyway, enough of Knausgaard. Let me know if you read it and if you liked it. Moving on into my other books. So here's one that I actually almost DNF'd, but I think I am going to stick with it. I've decided I want to really go back to Susanna Clarke's first book, which I don't even know when it came out, a while ago already now. She's all been in the BookTube's darling video because of Piranesi, but I wanted to go back and check this out. I'm listening to it mainly. It's mainly a listen that I have. Since I have the book of it, I do dip in now and then, and it's sort of historical fantasy. And one of the reasons why I wanted to listen to it was I wanted to sort of retain the 18th century vibe, but this is actually early 19th century, and it's not even early. I mean, it sort of is. She's a good writer, so you don't feel, but it's not written by someone from that time, and you can still tell, even though she's a good writer. And the reasons why I almost ditched it was she's written this strange book about magic, and the magic is it's getting more interesting, I think. I'm almost at the second part. So, but what's interesting or sort of not interesting is for the first person in the title, Mr. Norrel. He's not really very interesting, she hasn't made him as charismatic as you'd think the main person of your book should be, but maybe that's the point. I'm wondering I don't know why he seems so, basically, he's boring. He's a boring, pedantic magician, sort of kind of going against the wild ideas that we have about what magical magicians are like, I guess. That's the whole point. And there's this other spooky character, and I haven't figured out, is it just kind of going back to a basic binary of dark magic, and this person's the devil, and I don't know. So sort of the status of magic, which I am kind of interested in, and it pops up in fairy tales. We talk about, well, what's the power behind this? Who is doing this magic? Is it fairies? A lot of time it's fairies, and fairies are kind of a counterweight to a secular, or well, not secular because but a counterweight to authoritarian, hierarchical powers, mainly the church. That's how we kind of talk about them in the fairy tale class. And most of the fairies come up in French fairy tales. But there is a lot of fairy stuff in England too. I shouldn't diminish that anyway. So I'm going to stick with it, and I decided it's okay. I think I just spoil myself with these really fantastic reads, like that are usually sort of very, very old-timey. Like, I love Bleak House so much, and I really, really, really liked Clarissa. And so to sort of come back to a more, as we say in German, Unterhaltungsliteratur, sort of entertainment, whatever, just you're not that connected to anything, but you just go with the flow, that's okay too. I need to sort of, not everything has to be a fantastic, mind-blowing read, even though I kind of want it to be. We all do. And so I'm going to stick with it as my listen that I do while I do my chores and whatever, and just go with it. And also just try and have fun with the magic. Is quite charming. There is a charm to the way the way she describes things. She's a good writer. And I'm sure a lot of you read Piranesi, which I'm sort of saving because I kind of just wanted this. I've had this on my shelf for a while. I decided to go with this one. Tell me if you've read it. Let's see what else we have. Oh, it's so good. I love it so much. So I've had this on my shelf because of Shawn. He made me buy it, and I'm so glad I did. And I sort of always knew I would love Noopiming. And now that I finally started it, and I'm getting into the sort of background of the indigeneity, and so I've done a little bit of research into Leanne Betasamosake, Simpson, Mishisagig Nishnabig writer. Very interesting. She's got some music videos. She does music, so she's she's a creative of all different kinds, and her sort of reason for doing things is she's deeply committed to sort of non-Western and indigenous ways of knowing and ways of existing in the world, and I'm so there for that. There's a part of me that's really there for that, even though I'm steeped in all this Western stuff and I'm an Anglophile. And the fact that it has a lot of white space, I just think is very soothing for someone who's a slow reader. Plus, I just love the way she's written all of this. There was a quote just now. I'm reading it slowly. It's sort of like a poem. It's meditative. And there was just, the thing about Tour de France was hilarious. Because these are a bunch of white men racing around with metal contraptions between their legs for no reason. I mean, the Tour de France is just... And I remember once it came to our town and we were all so excited. We make such a big deal out of this race, and it's just kind of crazy. Also, this where they're talking about Tour de France is also this one of the characters, Akuenzi, has a close relationship with a tree, and it just reminds me of what last year in Heidelberg, where we kind of fell in love with a tree. I mean, I just had this big tree that was on my way to work. I just love trees. I mean, I don't even go out to nature that much, but I'm there for all the tree stuff and all these kinds of really great quotes. Sabi has a tendency to show up at dramatic times and then disappear through the normal. I just love the writing. It's very, very quotable, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm also kind of decorating my book a little bit, because why not? And I will try and do a little bit more research on The Cure for White Ladies, how it's connected to the settler woman who came and wrote her story about it being in the wilderness. Maybe it will come up in the book itself, but excellent stuff. Really, really like it. Noopiming. I knew I would like it, but it had to be the right time, and now in summer there's the right time. Moving on into planned stuff, even though I sort of already started this, and I'm actually pleasantly surprised that it's not as long as I thought it was. So I started The Inferno. Sorry for weird glare. Dante's Inferno is fantastic, and I'm so excited to read it, and I think this will be slow too. First of all, there's a lot of notes. Also, there's a fantastic resource. There's, first of all, the YouTuber who did all the cantos, Tom, I forget the name, Tom. And then, but there's also the digital Dante through, I think, Columbia University. They have a professor giving lectures on all the different cantos. And it's just, so there's almost like, there's so many layered things going on with my reading that it slows me down a little bit. Like with the Noopiming, becoming interested in Ojibwe language, Anish, I forget the word for Anish, the language, and like Ojibwe stuff is really cool, and there's an Ojibwe word of the day channel. I love the sounds of the language. I love different languages anyway. but it does kind of take me all these different parts, which is on the one hand wonderful, on the other hand kind of slows the reading down. But that's okay. But Dante's Inferno is a gap in my reading. I have so many gaps. I haven't read the Iliad. Don't tell anyone. I'm telling you right now. I haven't read the Iliad, and I started listening to it, but I'm going to put that back on hold. I haven't done Ovid, and I really need to read Ovid Metamorphoses because of fairy tales. But I think Dante will be a little bit more accessible because it's a little bit later. And what I love about the Digital Dante website is it has the Italian right next to it, and then it has 2 different translations, and then this is a 3rd translation. So so many different translations of the Divine Comedy. Tell me if you've read it. I think I will love it. Born in 1265, and he died shortly after completing the Divine Comedy. So it's 14th century literature of, good stuff. Amazing. So just getting started on that. Things I have already started. So I'm sort of halfway through the first volume of Pilgrimage. I posted a picture of, now I have all 4 volumes of this 12-volume autofiction work by Dorothy Richardson. I probably will do a dedicated video to her, to the works at some point. And she did consider the 12 short novels as chapters. So it really is one long novel. Extremely long, because there's 4 of these. And there's even one set at the back that's posthumous sort of unfinished notes to a further one. So yeah, and it's very, very good. And it's been a while since I've been able to read some of this, so I think I'll come back to this one with more details. But as I've already said, it's stream of consciousness, it's female-centric, woman-centric, a young woman in London. It's autofiction that's based on her own experiences somewhat of her sort of middle-class but impoverished family. And sort of these people who are sort of middle-class, but they're not part of the gentry or the movers and shakers of their time are of interest to me. Speaking of another person like that, George Orwell is sort of the focus of Solnit's group of essays. Now, Orwell I have an interesting relationship to because I do remember him as one of my mother's heroes. She was totally, I think she kind of thought he was like the best person because he was someone who was very intellectual and wanted to write, but he had such a strong social conscience. He wanted to, he went and wrote the Whig and Peer book, and you find out about that in here. It's a really nice way to approach Orwell, I think, is through Solnit's fantastic essays about him. And you see the sort of, he wanted to not be an intellectual. He was anti-intellectual in the sense that he wanted to be one of the normal. As a little video I saw, he's interested in ordinary people and ordinary people's lives and not belittling or being sort of condescending to ordinary people. And that's part of his sort of social enterprise. And yet he was sort of someone who quickly honed in on the fact that a lot of leftist stuff gets co-opted by Stalinism pretty early, even going to Catalonia, to the Spanish Civil War. That's when he starts becoming disillusioned with parts of the left, who are too dogmatic, who are too authoritarian. He's an anti-authoritarian person, even though he was a leftist. And he was also sort of critical of certain aspects of religiosity. And I remember my mother talking about Down and Out in Paris and London, and she really loved that book. So it's a certain type of journalistic writing, but very good writing too. And then he goes on and writes the novels. Now, Solnit's really interesting. I started listening to this, and I do like the way she reads it, but she does have a sort of lilting, lyrical, for lack of my limited knowledge, to me it sounds like someone who's from California. And I do like it. I like her voice, but I also kind of think that sometimes her voice, the goodness of the writing is sometimes, it's so sort of casual the way she reads it. And I'm a little bit torn as to whether I want to listen or read to it. I think I might read the rest of it. I'm kind of like halfway through. This goes really quickly, I think. And it is very good. And it's almost Springerson worthy because of the fact that she does focus in on him and his garden and nature and plants and roses. But then it kind of goes in other directions too and talks about his life, I guess. And she's very good at, picking up on one topic and kind of she meanders all over the place. I'm sort of thinking, Orwell did this too sometimes, and then coming back to her main theme. She's a really good writer, and I'm sure some of you read this book. Tell me if you have and what you thought. A few other things going on here. 21 minutes. I'm sorry. I just bought this because it's called The Kingdom of Ohio, which I think is a great title. It's like Ohio Kingdoms. And I don't know if it's very good yet. I've started it and it's not bad. This is urban historical fantasy of a nature. It has a good blurb by people like Michael Moorcock, the science fiction fantasy writer, who says it's a spiritual meditation reminiscent of Pynchon. I'm down for it, for another sort of, it doesn't have to be a 5-star, it can just be a breezy read, at night, whatever. So I'll tell you how I go. I'm not very far, but I thought it was a funny title. I picked this up when I went to Half Price the last time. Last thing I'll talk about in this video is the fact that I sort of have these other interests that are sort of connected to reading, but they're also just sort of areas I want to find out more about. And one of them is Buddhism. I've always had a sort of amateurish interest in meditation and just the idea of Buddhism. And one of the early books that I've carried around with me for years now from graduate school, and it's because of graduate school, I wanted to buy a book called Being Nobody and Going Nowhere, because that is kind of how you feel most of the time in academia, or I did it for sure. I still do. No, it's fine. But I'm fine with being nobody. I mean, that's it. That's the whole point. And this is actually, she's a fascinating writer, Ayya Khema. She was a German Jewish person who decided to, but her parents had to move to Shanghai. Her biography sounds fascinating. She's actually written her own autobiographies, which I might get to. So her parents had to flee the Nazis, so they go to Shanghai, as a lot of German Jews did. But then they had to flee Shanghai because the communists were coming, so they went over to California. And then she sort of settles down, but then she decides at some point she has a spiritual awakening and decides she wants to go she's interested in Buddhism. And she leaves her first husband and has another German husband, and I think they live in all kinds of places. But she settles down in the end in Sri Lanka and becomes a Buddhist nun. And her style of writing is a little old-fashioned, but I really like the way she writes. And it sort of has a directness. This is a simple book for ordinary people who want to find greater happiness and contentment in their lives by following a spiritual path. Now, I'm not even ready to say that Buddhism is, for me, a spiritual thing. But I am drawn to the fact that it's not theistic, that it's practical. And I've just already been interested in it. But the recent development has been that I did a little bit of research into the history of Buddhism, and I realized, wait, there's Theravada Buddhism, there's Mahayana, there's the 3 schools of Buddhism, which is new knowledge to me, and I'm kind of wanting to find out more. And so there's a really good channel, I think it's called Doug's Dharma. But then, of course, Noah from Everyone Who Reads Must Converse, he has a bunch of stuff on Buddhism, so I'm definitely going to watch some of his videos on it too, and I've already started making notes. And then I have another book on my Kindle called Buddhism for Dummies, because that's what I am. But I do want to find out more, and I'm sort of like have this academic urge to get it straight with the 3 different schools. The Vajrayana is the last one that is sort of moving on into, and see, the 3 schools are connected to the historical sort of geographical development of it, but then it gets all complicated with Western influences and how their take on the different schools, and then of course you have Zen and other developments. So there's sort of the historical, so how it has changed. Anyway, I'm fascinated by all of that. The other thing that I'll just mention is a channel that I really think is fascinating to someone who's interested in the occult or esoteric stuff, and I have a mild interest in that. That's why I'm kind of listening to the book on magic, the Mr. Norrel. A very good academic. She's just delightful. Dr. Angela Puca from Italy, who's now a university professor in Leeds, at the University of Leeds. And she has this just really funny, but totally academic way of presenting stuff like to do with shamanism and the occult and all the different versions, shades of the occult. She has stuff on Aleister Crowley, who I've always been kind of interested in. And I think even these interests sort of go back a little bit to my mother, who was also really interested in parapsychology and sort of spiritualism. And I guess with spiritualism and parapsychology, it is always sort of the question of, well, do you believe in these things? Do you believe in ghosts? Do you believe in being able to communicate to the spirits? And I'd have to say I don't. But then I still, and I don't worry, don't worry, maybe you do, and that's fine. A lot of my students, I ask them in fairy tale class, do you believe in ghosts? And about half of them say they do. And that's fine. I kind of have this sense of, I think there are people who see ghosts, and even if it's just whatever, however you want to accept that, is it just what they're in their heads, or they actually exist? Maybe they do. I'm sort of agnostic when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I watched a really interesting talk that she had with another professor who did research on people who have seances somewhere in England now 2020, and he didn't believe it at all, but he did a really good job of describing how he saw something, and apparently other people saw it too, like a being. Oh, it was so interesting. And it's almost like I kind of want to see something, but so far I haven't seen anything, and I'm not really that interested in seances, but I sort of like, I want to, but I don't know. I have this sort of unacademic view of some people do, some people don't, and that's just the way it is. And I have a feeling I'm just someone who doesn't, even though I'm interested in it. Tell me what you think. Anyway, but I'll post a link to Dr. Angela Puca's channel. She calls it a symposium, Angela's Symposium. She does a really good job of documenting her sources, and even though she has a very sort of accessible way of presenting it with her Italian accent, it's always very sort of well sourced and you can sort of tell she thinks about it in an academic way, which is helpful. I haven't really delved into whether she believes some of them. She seems to have an affinity for it, at least, but I think it's also kind of connected to her wanting to study it. And I think having an open mind, you can't be sort of against it completely if you want to study it, but you don't have to necessarily believe any of it. So yeah, long chatty video. Everything is well in our neck of the woods. Bill he's extremely interested in native plants, and he's joined a group called The Wild Ones that does kind of native plant stuff, and he's doing all kinds of things in the garden. I'll try and take more pictures of the stuff he's planted, and he's trying to keep the deer out. That's always a bit of a challenge here in our yard. He did plant some tomatoes, and we hope that because they just always taste so much better than store-bought. Homegrown tomatoes taste better, as most of you know, or a lot of you know. And so, yeah, everything's going well. Sorry for the length of this. I will be back. I'll try and do perhaps weekly updates. I think that, and I might do a vlog if I feel up to it, even though there's not that much going on. But just take you through my day is always kind of fun when you have more time. Hope everyone's doing well. Thank you for all the comments. There's still some I need to get to, and yeah, I'll talk to you very soon. Bye bye.